The tri-state tornado outbreak of 1925 was one of the most devastating natural disasters in United States history. It took place on March 18, 1925, and is remembered as the deadliest tornado outbreak ever recorded. This event spanned multiple states in the Midwest and southern United States, including Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. The tornadoes that formed during this outbreak caused unimaginable destruction, taking the lives of over 750 people and injuring more than 2,200 others. On that fateful day, at least 12 major tornadoes were confirmed across the region. The most infamous of these was the tri-state tornado, which carved a path of destruction that was 219 miles long, making it the longest tornado track ever recorded. This deadly tornado ripped through Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana, leaving behind unimaginable devastation. It was the deadliest tornado in the history of the United States and the second deadliest tornado in world history. The tri-state tornado outbreak left entire towns flattened, lives shattered, and communities reeling from the massive destruction. With no modern warning systems in place at the time, many were caught completely off guard by the powerful storms. This tornado outbreak stands as a reminder of the terrifying power of nature and the severe impact it can have on people's lives. It also became a defining moment in meteorological history, as researchers would later look back to better understand the factors that led to such a catastrophic event. In the years since, meteorologists have studied the outbreak to try and piece together how such a deadly series of tornadoes formed and why it caused so much devastation. Though this tornado event occurred almost 100 years ago, its memory still lingers in the regions affected and serves as a stark reminder of the force and unpredictability of nature. The conditions leading up to the tri-state tornado outbreak of 1925 were ideal for the formation of violent storms. During the early part of March, an unusually warm and moist air mass moved up from the Gulf of Mexico, colliding with a cold, dry air mass from Canada. This clash of air masses created an unstable atmosphere over the Midwest and southern United States. On March 18, 1925, these ingredients came together to form an intense low-pressure system that would spawn a series of deadly tornadoes. The first signs of trouble appeared in the early afternoon when thunderstorms began developing over southeastern Missouri. The atmosphere was so unstable that these storms quickly turned severe. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the first tornadoes had touched down near the town of Ellington, Missouri. Within minutes, the storm strengthened, and what would become the deadliest tornado in U.S. history began its nearly 3.5-hour journey across 3 states. The tornado first tore through Missouri, destroying farms, homes, and small towns in its path. By the time it crossed the Mississippi River into Illinois, it had already killed hundreds of people and leveled several communities. The powerful winds of the tornado ripped buildings off their foundations, uprooted trees, and tossed debris for miles. In some places, the damage was so severe that entire towns were unrecognizable. As the day wore on, the tornado continued its relentless march across southern Illinois and into Indiana. With each passing minute, the death toll climbed higher, and the destruction grew more widespread. People had little to no warning before the tornado hit, as there were no modern forecasting systems like radar or storm sirens. In many cases, residents didn't realize they were in danger until the tornado was already upon them. The lack of warning and the sheer size of the tornado contributed to the massive loss of life and property. By the end of the day, the tri-state tornado had left a path of destruction over 200 miles long, with winds estimated to be over 300 miles per hour at its peak. The storm had also triggered several other smaller tornadoes across the region, adding to the overall devastation. The tri-state tornado's impact on the cities it passed through was catastrophic. In Illinois, the town of Murfreesboro was hit especially hard. With a population of about 12,000 at the time, the tornado destroyed nearly everything in its path. The storm struck at approximately 2:30 in the afternoon, leveling schools, homes, and businesses. Entire blocks were reduced to rubble, and over 200 people lost their lives in Murfreesboro alone, making it the single deadliest town affected by the tornado. The damage left behind was so extreme that it took months for rescue crews to fully sift through the debris and begin rebuilding. West Frankfort, another town in Illinois, was also devastated by the tornado. Here, many coal miners who had just returned from their shifts were caught by surprise as the tornado ripped through their community. The storm left behind a staggering death toll of over 150 people in West Frankfort, and entire neighborhoods were wiped off the map. Survivors recalled the terrifying roar of the storm and the chaos that followed as those who escaped with their lives tried to locate their families and neighbors amid the destruction. In Indiana, the town of Griffin was also in the tornado's path, suffering significant damage. Though the population was much smaller than the Illinois towns, the storm still managed to take lives and destroy countless homes. The aftermath left survivors struggling to find shelter, food, and medical help in the midst of overwhelming devastation. Aside from the towns themselves, the tornado caused widespread damage to farmland, transportation infrastructure, and utilities. Crops were flattened, livestock killed, and miles of railroad tracks torn up. Telephone and telegraph lines were downed, cutting off communication with the outside world. Roads became impassable due to debris, leaving many isolated for days until rescue crews could reach them. The immediate aftermath of the tornado was marked by confusion, chaos, and fear. Communities banded together to search for survivors and to care for the injured, but the scale of the disaster made recovery slow and difficult. The aftermath of the tri-state tornado left entire regions in shock. With thousands of homes destroyed and over 600 lives lost, the survivors faced an overwhelming task of rebuilding. Many were left homeless with few possessions and had to rely on makeshift shelters in churches, schools, and other buildings that remained standing. Emergency response was slow, as communication lines were cut and roads were blocked by debris, further complicating rescue efforts. Hospitals and clinics in the affected areas were quickly overwhelmed with the number of injured people. Local doctors, nurses, and volunteers worked tirelessly to treat wounds, but supplies ran low within days. In some cases, makeshift hospitals were set up to handle the influx of patients. Medical teams from nearby cities eventually arrived, bringing much-needed assistance and resources to treat the injured and provide care for those affected. Relief efforts were further hindered by the damage to infrastructure. Roads, bridges, and railroads were destroyed, making it difficult for supplies and rescue teams to reach the worst-hit areas. It took several days before aid could arrive from surrounding states, and even longer for organized relief efforts to be put into place. The American Red Cross and other organizations mobilized, sending volunteers, food, clothing, and medical supplies to help the thousands of displaced families. Rebuilding communities took years. For many survivors, the psychological toll was as significant as the physical destruction. Families who lost loved ones struggled to cope with the grief and trauma of the event. Entire towns had to be reconstructed, and it took immense effort from both local residents and outside aid to restore some sense of normalcy. In many cases, entire neighborhoods were unrecognizable, and the process of rebuilding homes and businesses was slow and laborious. The tri-state tornado's destruction also led to changes in disaster response and preparedness. Local governments began to reevaluate their emergency response plans, emphasizing the need for better communication systems and quicker access to medical and relief supplies. While the tornado's path of destruction could not have been predicted, the disaster prompted discussions about how to be better prepared for future natural disasters. The legacy of the tri-state tornado remains deeply etched in the history of the Midwest. The disaster, which struck on March 18, 1925, reshaped the lives of thousands and left a lasting impact on the communities affected. The sheer scale of the devastation, along with the unprecedented number of casualties, made the tornado a pivotal event in the region's history. In the years that followed, the tri-state tornado became a significant case study for meteorologists and emergency responders. Efforts to understand the factors that led to such a powerful and long-lasting tornado spurred advancements in meteorology. While the technology of the time could not predict tornadoes, the devastation underscored the need for better forecasting methods and storm warning systems. In the decades that followed, scientists and meteorologists worked toward developing systems that could give people more time to prepare and seek shelter. Beyond the scientific advancements, the disaster also fostered a sense of resilience and community among the survivors. Towns that had been leveled by the storm gradually rebuilt, and the stories of survival, bravery, and solidarity became part of the local lore. Despite the overwhelming destruction, people came together to rebuild homes, schools, businesses, and their lives. The experience also highlighted the importance of neighborly support and the collective spirit of recovery as communities leaned on each other to move forward. Today, the tri-state tornado is remembered not just for the destruction it caused, but also for the lessons it provided in preparedness, response, and recovery. Monuments and memorials stand in several of the affected towns, honoring the lives lost and reminding future generations of the storm's profound impact. The disaster also serves as a sobering reminder of the power of nature and the importance of continued advancements in weather forecasting and disaster management. The tri-state tornado remains one of the deadliest and most destructive tornadoes in American history. Its aftermath led to improved systems for emergency response and laid the groundwork for modern tornado warnings, leaving a lasting mark not only on those who experienced it firsthand, but on the entire field of disaster preparedness. On April 26, 1989, a devastating natural disaster struck the Maniganj district of Bangladesh, leaving a profound mark on history. The event, known as the Daulatpur Saturia tornado, would go on to become the deadliest tornado ever recorded, claiming the lives of approximately 1,300 people. This tornado occurred during Bangladesh's peak tornado season, a time of year known for severe weather events due to the country's geographical location and its susceptibility to extreme storms. The tornado's impact was felt most strongly in the cities of Daulatpur and Saturia, which were right in its path. This area had already been suffering from a severe drought that had lasted for 6 months. Crops had withered, and the population had been praying for rain. Ironically, when the rains finally came, they arrived as part of a catastrophic weather system that produced this deadly tornado. Bangladesh, situated in the Ganges Basin, is no stranger to tornadoes. It experiences several tornadoes each year, most of them occurring in the months before and after the annual monsoon season. The conditions in this region are particularly favorable for tornado formation, as hot, moist air from the Bay of Bengal clashes with cool air from the Himalayas. In the days leading up to the Daulatpur Saturia tornado, all the factors were lining up to create the perfect storm. The tornado itself struck a region already weakened by natural forces. Homes were poorly constructed and the population was largely rural, making it especially vulnerable to the intense power of the tornado, but few could have anticipated the sheer scale of the destruction that was about to be unleashed. As the tornado formed and intensified, no one could have predicted that this single event would soon be marked in history as the deadliest tornado ever recorded, forever changing the lives of those who experienced it and leaving a permanent scar on the region's landscape. With this brief overview, we set the stage for one of the most tragic natural disasters the world has ever seen. The formation of the Daulatpur Saturia tornado was driven by a combination of weather patterns and atmospheric conditions that aligned perfectly to create one of the deadliest storms in recorded history. In the days leading up to April 26, 1989, a low-pressure system developed over Bihar and West Bengal, India. This system remained almost stationary, building pressure across the region, including Bangladesh, where the tornado would eventually strike. As the low-pressure system held its position, warm, moist air from the Bay of Bengal began flowing northeast into Bangladesh. At the same time, cold, dry air was flowing south from the Himalayas. This clash of air masses created the perfect conditions for severe thunderstorms. In the upper atmosphere, strong westerly winds from the jet stream further increased the instability. The jet stream, moving at speeds of over 150 miles per hour, created significant wind shear, a key factor in the development of the powerful thunderstorms that would ultimately spawn the tornado. On April 26th, the situation intensified. The ridge over China tightened the pressure gradient across Bangladesh, further fueling the storm system. By noon, severe thunderstorms began forming rapidly across the country. The most dangerous of these storms formed over western Bangladesh, where a dry line, an area where dry and moist air masses meet, served as a focal point for storm development. As the storms intensified, they developed into supercells, powerful, rotating thunderstorms capable of producing tornadoes. In this case, the extreme wind shear and atmospheric instability made conditions ideal for the formation of a tornado. At around 12:30 UTC, one of these supercells began rotating violently, and a tornado touched down near the town of Daulatpur in the Maniganj district. The residents of the region, already living in the grip of a months-long drought, had little time to prepare. Tornado warnings were not widely available, and emergency systems were limited. The tornado touched down with little warning, rapidly gaining strength as it moved eastward towards Saturia. By the time it reached full force, it was cutting a path of destruction across the countryside. As the tornado formed and began its devastating journey, there were few ways to predict how powerful it would become or how many lives it would affect. The storm was building momentum, and within hours it would become one of the most catastrophic weather events the world had ever seen. On April 26, 1989, around 12:30 UTC, the Daulatpur Saturya tornado began its path of destruction. As it touched down near Daulatpur, the storm quickly escalated into a monstrous force, moving eastward with terrifying speed. It soon struck the densely populated areas of Saturya, unleashing a level of destruction that no one could have anticipated. The tornado, with winds estimated to be between 210 and 260 miles per hour, tore through the landscape, creating a path of destruction nearly 50 miles long and over 1 mile wide. Entire villages were obliterated within minutes as the tornado flattened everything in its path. Homes, trees, and buildings were torn apart, leaving behind nothing but rubble. For the residents of the area, there was little time to react. The immense power of the storm meant that any shelter in the tornado's direct path was unlikely to provide protection. One of the hardest hit regions was Saturya, where the tornado reached its peak strength. The impact on the community was devastating. Reports from the aftermath describe scenes of total destruction. Entire neighborhoods leveled, with few structures left standing. The storm swept through with such intensity that the landscape was almost unrecognizable. The only remnants of once thriving villages were the skeletons of uprooted trees and scattered debris. Over the course of just a few hours, the tornado ravaged an area covering 150 square kilometers, leaving behind a trail of devastation. Families were separated, homes were destroyed, and livestock was lost. Even the crops that had survived the long drought preceding the storm were annihilated by the tornado's violent winds and the hailstorm that accompanied it. The death toll continued to rise as the full extent of the disaster became clear. In addition to the physical destruction, the human toll was staggering. Approximately 1,300 people were killed by the storm, with more than 12,000 others injured. The number of fatalities was so high in part because many homes in the area were poorly constructed and unable to withstand such a powerful tornado. Entire communities were left in ruins, with tens of thousands of people displaced and homeless. The tornado continued its destructive path for hours, leaving the towns of Daulatpur and Saturya among the hardest hit areas. Despite the widespread devastation, the tornado did not lose its strength quickly, continuing to cause significant damage until it eventually dissipated. As the tornado moved on, the full scope of the disaster became more apparent. Villagers were left to sift through the wreckage of their homes, searching for survivors, while emergency response efforts were hampered by the extent of the damage. The storm had left behind a nightmare of destruction, changing the lives of the people in its path forever. When the tornado finally dissipated, the extent of the damage left behind was nothing short of catastrophic. The Daulatpur Saturya tornado not only wiped out homes and villages, but also caused unimaginable harm to the environment and the people who relied on it. The natural landscape, already suffering from a 6-month drought, was ravaged beyond recognition. Once fertile lands were reduced to barren stretches of debris, with uprooted trees and destroyed crops covering vast areas. More than 80,000 people were left homeless, as the tornado had obliterated everything in its path. Whole communities found themselves without shelter, food, or clean water. The infrastructure of the region, which was already fragile, was completely shattered. Roads were blocked by debris, making it difficult for emergency services to reach the hardest hit areas. Schools, hospitals, and markets were destroyed, leaving survivors without essential services. Those who had managed to escape the direct impact of the storm now faced a dire struggle for survival. In the immediate aftermath, the need for aid was critical. International organizations and local governments rushed to provide assistance, but the scale of the disaster overwhelmed relief efforts. Many of the injured did not receive medical attention for days, as the destruction of roads and communication systems made it nearly impossible to organize a rapid response. Thousands of people were left with untreated wounds, and the lack of medical facilities only compounded the suffering. The destruction of homes was so complete that rebuilding seemed an insurmountable task for the survivors. With limited resources, many people were forced to live in makeshift shelters, constructed from the remains of their former homes. Families huddled together in temporary huts made from salvaged wood and metal, trying to shield themselves from the elements. The trauma of losing loved ones, combined with the loss of homes and livelihoods, cast a long shadow over the survivors. Nature, too, bore the brunt of the storm's fury. The few crops that had managed to survive the drought were destroyed by the tornado, leaving entire regions without food. Livestock, a critical source of income and sustenance for many families, was decimated. The once vibrant fields were littered with dead animals and the remnants of farm structures. The landscape, once green and lush, had been transformed into a desolate wasteland. The combination of drought and tornado left the region with little hope for recovery in the near future. As days turned into weeks, the long-term impact of the tornado became clearer. Disease began to spread among the survivors, particularly in the overcrowded temporary shelters. The lack of clean water and sanitation facilities led to outbreaks of waterborne illnesses, further increasing the death toll. Hunger became an ever-present concern, as the loss of crops and livestock meant that there was little to sustain the population in the weeks following the disaster. The emotional toll was equally devastating. Entire families had been wiped out, and many survivors were left to mourn the loss of their loved ones. Communities that had once been tightly knit were shattered by the loss of lives and homes. The survivors faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives from the ground up, all while grappling with the grief and trauma left in the tornado's wake. The Daulatpur Saturia tornado of 1989 stands as a grim reminder of nature's power and the vulnerability of communities living in its path. This disaster not only caused a staggering loss of life, but also left an indelible mark on the fabric of Bangladeshi society. While estimates suggest that approximately 1,300 people perished, the true toll may never be fully understood. The devastation stretched far beyond the physical destruction. It altered lives forever. In the years following the tornado, efforts were made to rebuild the affected areas. However, the journey to recovery was slow and fraught with challenges. Many families found themselves trapped in a cycle of poverty, struggling to find stable housing and regain a sense of normalcy. The landscape, which had once been a vibrant community, was transformed into a harsh environment where hope was often overshadowed by loss. The tornado also highlighted the urgent need for improved disaster preparedness in Bangladesh. In a country prone to natural disasters, the Daulatpur Saturia tornado served as a wake-up call for the government and communities alike. It spurred discussions on enhancing early warning systems, building stronger infrastructure, and developing better emergency response plans. Communities began to understand the importance of awareness and education regarding tornadoes and other severe weather events, leading to initiatives aimed at reducing vulnerability in the future. In addition to raising awareness, the tornado prompted humanitarian organizations to focus on providing long-term support to affected families. Initiatives were launched to assist in rebuilding homes and infrastructure, while ensuring that families had access to basic needs like food and medical care. These efforts helped create a stronger foundation for the future. Though the scars of the past remained, the Daulatpur Saturia tornado is more than just a historical event. It serves as a powerful reminder of the impact of natural disasters on lives and communities. The stories of loss and survival continue to resonate, urging us to prioritize disaster preparedness and resilience. As we reflect on this tragedy, we remember not only the lives lost, but also the strength and determination of the survivors, who faced unimaginable challenges and worked tirelessly to rebuild their lives. Ultimately, the legacy of the Daulatpur Saturia tornado lives on in the hearts of those who experienced it. It is a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure in the face of disaster and a call to action for future generations to be better prepared for the challenges that nature may bring. On Wednesday, May 27, 1896, a catastrophic event struck the city of St. Louis, Missouri, and its neighboring East St. Louis, Illinois. This historic tornado, known as the Great Cyclone, would go down in history as one of the deadliest and most destructive tornadoes in the United States. As the day began, the weather seemed calm, with people going about their usual activities. The local weather bureau had predicted thunderstorms, but nothing that would indicate the scale of destruction that was about to unfold. Around noon, ominous clouds began to gather and the barometric pressure started to drop. For many, this was a sign of trouble ahead. However, the day proceeded with little concern from most residents, as the forecasters lacked the technology to predict tornadoes of such magnitude. By mid-afternoon, the skies darkened significantly, causing unease among some citizens who sought shelter at home. At 5 o'clock in the evening, everything changed. Thick, swirling clouds took on a menacing green hue as rain began to pour in heavy droplets. Within moments, the Great Cyclone touched down, carving a path of destruction through the heart of St. Louis. In just 20 minutes, this powerful tornado claimed at least 255 lives, injured over 1,000 others, and left more than 5,000 people homeless. The hardest hit areas included the fashionable Lafayette Square and Compton Heights neighborhoods, as well as the poorer Mill Creek Valley. This tornado would not only change the landscape of St. Louis, but also alter its history. It remains the third deadliest tornado in the United States, forever marking May 27th as a day of unimaginable loss and devastation. As the day of the disaster approached, the atmosphere in St. Louis was charged with tension. On May 27, 1896, meteorologists noted a storm system moving through Illinois and Missouri. While they had predicted thunderstorms, they could not foresee the violent tornado that was about to form. The morning began quietly, but by noon the sky was darkening and the air felt heavy and oppressive. The first signs of trouble appeared when a significant drop in barometric pressure alarmed those who were familiar with such indicators. People began to take shelter as the clouds thickened and turned a foreboding shade of green. In the afternoon, the conditions intensified. Around 5 o'clock, the storm system had built up enough energy to spawn what would become the Great Cyclone. Just before the tornado touched down, 2 supercell thunderstorms were developing nearby, creating the perfect conditions for a tornado to form. One of these supercells unleashed a smaller tornado near Bellflower, Missouri, resulting in the tragic death of one woman. By 6:15 in the evening, another F3 tornado struck a school in Audrain County, killing 3 students and injuring many more. As 5 o'clock approached, the swirling clouds unleashed their fury. The Great Cyclone touched down 6 miles west of Eads Bridge and quickly escalated into a powerful tornado. In a matter of moments, the storm began to carve a path of destruction through the city, leaving residents unprepared for the ferocity of what was to come. With nearly 30 tornadoes reported across the region that day, St. Louis was about to face one of the most catastrophic natural disasters in its history. The afternoon of May 27, 1896, transformed into chaos as the Great Cyclone struck St. Louis. Just after 5 o'clock, the tornado touched down with an unimaginable force. It quickly became evident that this was no ordinary storm. Witnesses described a massive swirling column of debris that roared through the streets, leveling everything in its path. In just 20 minutes, the tornado wreaked havoc across a wide swath of the city. The powerful winds, estimated to be between 168 and 199 miles per hour, flattened entire neighborhoods. Lafayette Square and Compton Heights, once bustling and vibrant, were reduced to piles of rubble. The Mill Creek Valley, a poorer area, faced devastation as well, suffering extensive damage and loss of life. The tornado cut a 10-mile path of destruction, destroying 311 buildings outright and severely damaging over 7,200 more. Streets became unrecognizable as homes, schools, factories, and parks were swept away. The storm was relentless, leaving a continuous path nearly 1 mile wide of broken structures and downed trees. As the tornado moved into East St. Louis, the devastation continued. Within moments, at least 255 people lost their lives, and over 1,000 others were injured. The city was thrown into a state of shock, with survivors frantically searching for loved ones amidst the chaos. Emergency services struggled to respond as they faced the sheer scale of destruction. Once the tornado passed, the air was filled with dust and debris, and the eerie silence that followed was palpable. What had started as a normal day had turned into a scene of unimaginable tragedy, forever changing the lives of those who experienced it. The impact of the Great Cyclone would be felt for years to come as the city began to confront the overwhelming aftermath of this catastrophic event. In the wake of the Great Cyclone, the destruction to St. Louis was immense, both in terms of physical damage and human loss. The impact on nature was stark, as trees that had stood for decades were uprooted or snapped like twigs. Parks once filled with life lay in ruins, with Lafayette Park becoming a haunting reminder of the storm's power. The landscape of the city had changed dramatically, with entire blocks reduced to nothing more than splintered wood and twisted metal. The aftermath revealed a heart-wrenching scene. Over 5,000 people found themselves homeless, their lives shattered in an instant. Families searched through the debris for any remnants of their possessions, while makeshift shelters sprang up in parks and community centers to provide some form of refuge. Local volunteers rallied to assist the wounded and homeless, digging through the rubble to rescue trapped individuals. Makeshift hospitals were set up to treat the injured, with doctors and volunteers working tirelessly through the night. As news of the devastation spread, aid began to pour in from neighboring cities and states, Offers of food, clothing, and financial support flooded the area, showcasing the resilience of the human spirit in times of crisis. Many residents who had escaped the destruction joined forces with relief efforts, displaying a strong sense of community in the face of adversity. The rebuilding process began almost immediately, but it was clear that recovery would take time. Debris was cleared from the streets and plans were drawn up for new buildings that would eventually rise from the ashes of the old. The disaster forced a reassessment of building codes and safety measures in tornado-prone areas. Many lessons were learned, which would influence future urban planning and disaster preparedness. The impact on the psyche of the community was profound. For years, the memory of that day lingered in the minds of residents. It was a constant reminder of the tornado's destructive force and a catalyst for change in how cities prepared for severe weather. As the years passed, the resilience of St. Louis shone through, but the scars of the Great Cyclone remained etched in the city's history. The Great St. Louis Tornado of 1896 left a lasting impact on the city and its people, shaping both its physical landscape and its future. The tornado, which lasted just 20 minutes, destroyed thousands of homes and buildings, leaving over 5,000 people homeless and causing more than $10 million in damage at the time. In today's value, that would be close to $5 billion. But the true cost of the disaster was much more than just monetary. It was felt in the lives lost and the city's collective trauma. In the years that followed, St. Louis rebuilt itself from the ground up. The areas hardest hit, like Lafayette Square and Compton Heights, were eventually restored, though some of the poorer neighborhoods, such as Mill Creek Valley, faced greater challenges in recovery. The rebuilding effort brought about a renewed focus on urban development, with better construction practices and an awareness of the need for storm preparedness. While technology at the time couldn't predict tornadoes accurately, the storm underscored the importance of improving weather forecasting and response systems. The tornado also had a lasting effect on the city's political and social landscape. In the 1897 city elections, reform candidates who had hoped to change the direction of St. Louis were defeated. The political shift was partly influenced by the devastation of the tornado and the role it played in mobilizing communities, particularly those heavily impacted by the storm. As St. Louis recovered, it continued to grow and eventually played host to the World's Fair just 8 years after the disaster, a testament to its resilience and determination to move forward. The tornado remains the third deadliest in United States history, and its legacy is still remembered today. It stands as a reminder of the sheer power of nature and the importance of preparation, community, and perseverance. St. Louis may have been scarred by the events of May 27, 1896, but the city's ability to rebuild, recover, and remember is what truly defines its story. The Great Cyclone will forever be a part of St. Louis's history, a symbol of destruction, survival, and the enduring strength of its people.